China has backstabbed India on the border issue yet again. Army sources have confirmed to headlines today that a Chinese army intrusion happened in the Chumar sector of Ladakh on the 17th of June. Chinese soldiers allegedly destroyed Indian equipment and threatened the locals. The Chinese have now reportedly withdrawn, taking some Indian equipment with them. This despite India's climb down of dismantling bunkers in the area as part of the agreement that ended China's intrusion in the Daulat Beg Oldi area in April. These are the indications coming that despite what had been promised and the climb down by India in the earlier intrusion case, Chinese troops have reportedly now withdrawn, but earlier on the 17th of June, this intrusion happened in the Chumar sector of Ladakh. Chinese soldiers allegedly destroyed Indian equipment and even threatened locals. The Chinese have now reportedly withdrawn, taking some Indian equipment with them. This despite India's climb down, like I mentioned, of dismantling bunkers in the area as part of the agreement that ended China's earlier intrusion. So even after the first understanding between Beijing and New Delhi, it seems that the aggression by the Chinese has continued again in the Ladakh area, this time in the Chumar sector, and this happened on the 17th of June. And this, very interestingly, the information coming out as the Defense Minister A.K. Antony visited Beijing in what was being highlighted by the Chinese side as something that is going to take ties forward. But this has been the case, provocation and aggression shown by the Chinese side. Even before A.K. Antony landed in Beijing, we heard one of the generals of the PLA coming out and making an extremely provocative statement. We have Jugal, who's joining us from the newsroom. Jugal, it seems that this entire tactic, the Chinese tactic of aggression, of provocation continues, and despite what we saw as a climb down by the Indian side of the earlier aggression and provocation in the Ladakh sector, they continue with it, this time in the Chumar sector. Jugal, if you can hear me, the earlier aggression that we saw, the intrusion by the Chinese forces, after that we saw a climb down as far as the Indian side was concerned. But it seems soon after that, there was yet another intrusion. Give us more details. What exactly happened?
Absolutely. Well, Maha, we've been able to confirm from the Northern Command of the Indian Army, which is the command responsible for the defense of the entire area, that an incident of this type has indeed occurred on the 17th of June. The Chinese troops had actually crossed over to what we consider as our area, and over there, these troops, which were Hindi-speaking troops, which yet again gives you an idea of the kind of capability that the Chinese side has developed over the years. These Hindi-speaking PLA troops entered into our area, they threatened the locals, and the Indian Army, which after the Depsang incident had actually stationed some monitoring equipment out there so that they don't need to be physically present to monitor the area. Even that equipment was damaged. That equipment was returned to the Indian Army at a border personnel meeting on the 3rd of July. All of this we've been able to confirm, Mahrukh. However, the unfortunate part is that I've been trying to speak to the MEA, which is the agency responsible for responding in international affairs. They've chosen to not comment. The ITBP, which is another agency manning the borders under the Home Ministry, they've shied away from commenting.
You because Commodore Uday Bhaskar is also joining us on the phone line. Commodore Bhaskar, what do you make of this aggression? We saw it earlier in this year. Then there was a certain kind of understanding where we saw the Indian side really doing a climb down. Now there's the latest information coming in on June the 17th of yet another incursion, this time in the Chumar sector, again in the Ladakh area. What do you have to say to this?
Well, I think it is reflective of a certain pattern of behavior that we associate in the first instance with the Chinese PLA. The fact that they carried out a similar kind of an incident in April when we had the Depsang incident, and now we have this incident ostensibly on the 17th of June. So clearly there is a certain pattern which we associate with the Chinese PLA. But concurrently, I think it's also indicative of a deeper issue, which is the political orientation as far as Beijing is concerned, meaning that we had the Indian Defense Minister, Mr. Antony, visit Beijing just a few days ago, and one presumes that this incident would have been reported to the official political apex on both sides, both in Beijing and New Delhi. So I think what is being tested is the ability of the two governments in Beijing and Delhi respectively to deal with such incidents. In this actually, Maruf, I think one sort of report that is coming, and your own reporter sort of mentioned this, the fact that the cameras were damaged. I find this as cause for concern. Meaning that if both sides want to maintain a certain degree of surveillance about each other's movements, then there must be procedures in place. Now, if the equipment has indeed been damaged and returned, it would suggest that there is a failure or the inadequacy of the procedures. And the third issue relates to the domestic debate in India.
Right.
That even Depsang, I don't think we have a clear understanding in the public domain as to what exactly happened.
But Mr.
Now we have June 17, so my
Right.
only concern is that we shouldn't Photoshop these incidents.
Right. But
The
Commodore
public needs to
Bhaskar, I mean, what are we to understand from the way things have been going? Now, you mentioned that this has to be handled at a political level also. And pretty much what we saw right before the defense minister landed in Beijing, we had the kind of statement, a provocative one, coming from a general in the PLA. And now, news of these intrusions which continue. Are we soft pedaling as a country as far as China is concerned on the issue of intrusions? Are we the ones who have taken a softer stand, and which is the reason why the Chinese have been even more aggressive?
Well, I think the Chinese retired general and his statement, which appeared in the Chinese media, was definitely an indicator about what I had suggested earlier was a certain pattern in terms
Right.
of how China and Beijing are dealing with this incident. Now, as an analyst, I think the concern here is that from the Indian side, that the government of India also needs to evolve a policy of communicating
Right.
with the Chinese in what would be described as a firm but effective manner, and also to inform the Indian public. I mean, this is a democracy.
Right.
So the need for some strategic communication, because we've had a lot of what I would call as fairly contradictory positions right from April when Depsang first happened. So nobody is suggesting that we have to sort of switch on the amber light. But I
Right.
think a need for Delhi to communicate within
More
the government
effectively.
system as to what is happening. I mean,
Right.
we are now hearing reports that the ITBP and the army had alerted the government at that time, and there seems to be a lack of clarity as to what exactly happened. So I think the need for transparency within is very critical, and do not Photoshop these incidents, whether it's Depsang or June 17th.
All right, Commodore Bhaskar, thanks so much for that. Jugal, I'm going to ask you that question. Commodore Bhaskar also mentioned it, and you were talking about how you're not getting any clear answers from the MEA. There seems to be a lack of transparency in the kind of responses that are coming. Is that the sense that you're getting as well?
No doubt about that, Maruk. In fact, this incident has happened on the 17th of June. We, after that, had the defense minister, who's the number 2 as far as the hierarchy in the government is concerned, who visited China, made all the right noises. It was seeming as if Depsang was history. There was nothing like that which had happened. But in reality, as now we are bringing on for our viewers, an incident of a similar nature had indeed occurred. So it only goes to show that, one, the government of India is not communicating with its own people as to what is the situation on the border. And as I was saying, Maruk, the MEA is the agency which is the official one to deal with any international issue. The spokesperson for the MEA has refused to comment right now. I spoke to the Director General of the ITBP, which is another agency which mans those borders along the Chinese side. Even they refused to comment. So it just goes to show that the government, it seems, has tied itself up in knots, and it is not able to come to terms with what has just happened, Maru.
Right, Jugal, stay on with us. We also have Sushant Sareen, who's a strategic affairs expert, joining us on the phone line. Mr. Sareen, I hope you've been hearing the information that Jugal, our correspondent, has been giving, because clearly there seems to be a lack of transparency in the way these incidents are being reported or what the government is saying. Now, I want your expert comments on why this is happening. Is it because the government, as a larger policy, wants to soft pedal the issue, doesn't want to provoke the Chinese? Because here you've had the defense minister going to Beijing, and now we get to know of incidents that have been happening after the earlier incursion that we saw in Ladakh, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of restraint being shown by the Chinese army.
I heard bits and pieces of what Commodore Uday Bhaskar said, and I cannot agree more with him. The problem is that the government's public outreach is so poor that, I think they're still living in about 5 decades back. They don't understand the way the new information media operates, the way information travels so fast, and then rather than giving an informed response to what is being reported, clarifying what is being reported, putting a perspective to what is happening, they just clam up as though they've been bitten by a snake or something. So this entire public diplomacy on part of the government, whether it be on China, whether it be on terrorism, whether it be on any other issue, is sadly lacking. So that is one big problem, and the reason why that is happening is that you are still operating in the 21st century with old bureaucratic structures, the PIB kind of a setup, which simply does not come up to the mark in this modern communication age. The second problem is that the general signaling which has been done by this government on a host of strategic issues, I think leaves a lot to be desired. There doesn't seem to be any clarity on the kind of direction which needs to be followed.
Right.
About China, about Afghanistan, about Pakistan. You are getting mixed signals. You have a foreign minister who says the Chinese are natural strategic allies. You have a defense minister who says something else. You have different ministers talking in different voices. You have a prime minister who doesn't talk. So you don't know what is the direction you want to follow. The third problem is there is a pusillanimous kind of an approach towards the Chinese. I'm not saying you enter into a conflict-like situation, but there are certain red lines which need to be drawn. This is not the first
red lines that need to be drawn.
This is not the first time that an incident has happened. And I don't think it's going to be the last time this incident has happened.
Okay, Sushant Sareen saying that red lines need to be drawn. There needs to be larger transparency. Jugal giving us more details, and Sushant Sareen and Commodore Bhaskar, thanks so much for speaking with us.